Hey, everybody, and welcome. This is Jeff Delto of Convergence Training, back with one of our semi-regular podcast, audiocast, webcast series. Today, I'm excited for a couple of reasons. One, we're talking with somebody from a industry I haven't spoken with a lot. This is the electric utilities industry, and it's Tom Baer. Tom is Senior Instructional Designer with Puget Sound Energy, and he's in their Electric Operations Training Unit. So that's exciting in general. We're going to be talking to Tom about training challenges in his industry. I'm also personally excited because Tom's a personal friend. We've worked together a couple times when we were younger in different capacities, but always in the learning and development field. So I think you guys will all enjoy this. And with that, let me say hi to Tom. Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing good. How are you, Jeff?
I'm great. Thanks so much for agreeing to join us and talk to us about your job and training there at your corporation. Before we jump in, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and your workplace and your job role?
Yeah, so I've been an instructional designer for about 20 years, sometimes longer than I want to admit. And when I got started in instructional design was actually when you and I were working together at this place called Video Discovery.
Like educational Laserdisc for science education.
Exactly. Yeah, the Laserdisc days. And back then there was this new thing called CD-ROMs.
And rumors of something they called the internet.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And so let's see, I've done instructional design across a broad range of situations. Video discovery, at least the projects I worked on were for middle school age kids. I've done stuff for higher education, adult on the job training like I'm doing now. I've done some of that before. Some stuff in the medical field, stuff in the child welfare system. So all sorts of things. And I've always felt very lucky to be able to work with subject matter experts and learn many different fields. So I started my current job about 5 months ago, and an electric utility that provides electricity to over 1 million households and businesses. It's actually the largest electric utility in Washington State. And I'll digress a little bit on the history of the company. It's sort of an amalgamation of many smaller utilities. Some of them are like small mom and pop utilities. And they sort of over time kind of, were bought and then, formed this larger utility. And we do electricity and natural gas. I'm on the electricity side, strictly on that side. And the group that I am in, I am in the electric distribution group. And so basically what our company does is we generate electricity, we transmit it, which is those big high voltage power lines, and then we distribute it. And distribution is what happens after the substation. So after the electricity is generated at a dam or a thermal power plant or whatever, it's transmitted over those big high voltage lines. And then it may go through one or more substations. And so basically the last substation before it gets to your house, the people I train, they manage those substations, and then they manage all the feeders and everything that happens all the way out to the customer's meter. And basically that involves a lot of situational awareness, monitoring what's happening, making sure that nothing's overloaded, nothing's undervolted. All the time, of course, people's power goes out, a car hits a power pole, or there will be planned maintenance that happens. So there's a lot of working with crews and switching things on and off or rerouting electricity. To me, it's a lot like being an air traffic controller. You're basically having to be aware of what a lot of people are doing, and your main job is safety. And then your next main job really is efficiency, getting people's electricity back on as quickly as possible. And of course, when there's a big storm and a lot of people's electricity is out, these people get very, very busy, and a lot of other people come in. And so let's see. So my role really in working with these people is to kind of sort of work with and manage the entire process of instructional design, of creating and delivering curriculum. And that starts with the analysis and then going through the creation of the curriculum and the delivery, and then all the way to evaluation. Let's see. I think that covers it. Yeah.
Your workplace, and your in general. Yeah. Excellent. Thank you so much. So, Tom, that was actually much more in depth on what the company did, and I found it really interesting. And since you brought it up and talked about generation and transmission and substations, I don't know what a substation is. Could you fill me in on that? Since you've learned so much from all these subject matter experts you've been working with.
Yeah. So basically, a substation will reduce the voltage of the electricity. So, like in transmission, you might have 500,000 volts. And basically, the main function of a substation is it has these big transformers that will lower the voltage until, of course, by the time it gets to your house, there's that last transformer that for many people is up on a pole, or it might be underground. And that reduces it to the 120 or so volts at your electrical outlet. But substations also, they also do a lot of switching. And I'm glad you can edit this stuff out in case I get too detailed.
No, you're doing good. It's good.
But basically, at a substation too, coming into the substation are high voltage lines, and coming out are what's called feeders. And feeders are basically the lines, if you're driving along an arterial or along any street, and if it's overhead power, those lines on wooden poles where you have, drops down to houses or businesses, those are called feeders. And a typical substation will have several of them. And sometimes, if a part of the system goes out, if a tree falls down or something, you might, you can sort of switch a circuit from one, or part of a circuit from one feeder to another, or kind of swap part of one circuit for another. A little bit of history, you might be aware of sort of the rivalry between Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. And Thomas Edison was all for direct current, and Tesla was for alternating current, and alternating current won out. And one of the main reasons why AC won out is because you can step the voltage up and down really easily. And because of that, also because it's easier to step voltage up and down, you can raise voltage, because for transmitting for long distances, you want high voltage. And of course, within your house, you want lower voltage, and AC makes it really easy to step that up and down. And actually, our company goes back to the days when Nikola Tesla was alive and was designing equipment for Westinghouse. And so, I know at least one of our, maybe I was going to say at least, but maybe it is just one of our power plants that was built, went online in the 1890s. That was built with Westinghouse equipment. That goes, when Nikola Tesla was designing for them.
Oh, that's fantastic. Thanks, Tom. I learned something about that surrounded me my whole life, and I never knew anything about it. So that was a great intro. So what are some of the major training needs at your workplace then?
So some of the needs that sort of come to mind first, I would say, a big one is teaching subject matter experts to deliver some of the training.
So like train the trainer?
Train the trainer, exactly. So basically, in our workplace, it's very important to people that the person training them has credibility, has subject matter knowledge, and actually does the work on a regular basis. And so, so a big thing that I'm going to be involved with, I haven't gotten to that point yet on the first project that I'm on, but I will be involved in Train the Trainers, and we do that very deliberately. I would say another big training need is helping people, and these people their job title is usually distribution operator. The people that I'd say the main audience that I work on. For curriculum, basically helping them keep up with constant change in an industry that's changing profoundly.
Yeah,
the technology is changing a lot, and I think it was only a couple of years ago when they had to start using a new technology platform for doing their jobs, and now we're actually rolling out yet another one. This one.
Could you tell us what kind of, when you say technology platform, what you're talking about there? I don't need a brand or anything, but just a type of product or.
So this is a platform that actually a lot of the people that you interview might use. It's called ADMS. Actually, no, not ADMS. The one that you might be familiar with is SCADA, which basically, I forget what all the letters stand for, but it's basically computer monitoring of very complex systems, and it's used a lot in factories. Okay. I imagine it's used in mines. It's just basically, if you have a lot of devices out there, in your plants, or say in your mine, it's basically a way of gathering sensing data, like temperatures or maybe even the breathing atmosphere. I'm not quite sure how SCADA might be used in mines, but it's a very common sort of way of doing things. So in the electric utility industry, it's called ADMS, or at least in distribution. So Automated Distribution and Management System. And it's basically a way that, I guess more specific, these people are sitting in control rooms, and they're sitting at a desk where they have a whole bunch of big computer monitors in front of them. And these monitors are giving them information about what's happening out in the system.
Sure.
Amperage and voltage, and what is switched on, what's switched off. And so it basically allows them to do sort of like their air traffic control thing.
Right.
And basically this platform allows them, on a dynamic map, to go to a specific transformer, say, and change a parameter, or go to a specific switch and switch it on or off, or go to a specific, like if a switch needs to stay off. So this gets into the safety part of it. Basically, one of the things that these operators do is they do what's called issuing a clearance, which is basically a type of lockout tagout, where a specific part of a circuit is de-energized, where there are tags that say this must stay de-energized until the operator until the operator dictates that this will become energized again.
Yep.
And so they're using this system, what will be called an ADMS system, to do that.
Gotcha. And so I interrupt you, and I apologize, but that was fascinating as well. So you've changed ADMS platforms a couple of times, and that's part of your job responsibilities, dealing with the change management and getting people to buy into the new system and learn it. Is that correct?
Mostly correct. So basically, I'm not sure how many times it's been changed in the past. And I also think that technically, and I could be wrong here, but I think that technically what we have now is not ADMS. It's sort of a different sort of type of animal that involves a couple of different systems. But I do know that a couple of years ago it was changed, and now it's going to change again. And yeah.
All right. And then so
but even after it changes, there will be upgrades and updates and additional applications and that sort of.
Sure. So you talked about train-to-trainer is a big training need to deal with your subject matter experts. You talked about kind of change management and all these new systems that are coming and are going to keep coming, maybe faster and faster. Any other primary training challenges?
Oh, I would say safety is a big safety. It's at the core of the company's culture. In fact, just a little bit about the company culture. In fact, anytime there's a meeting, the meetings start with a safety moment, which is basically somebody share like a near miss that may have happened in their personal lives. And they say, basically, something like just, be careful when you're driving in a parking lot. It could be something like that. But basically, safety is at the core of the company's culture, and it's also at the core of what the operators do.
That makes sense. It's, powerful, dangerous thing, and came up in your example when you're talking about essentially lockout, tagout. All right, so you've got train-to-trainer, we've got change management and keeping people abreast of new technologies. We've got safety and safety training. If those are some of your training needs, what are some of the challenges that you face while trying to meet those training needs?
I would say one challenge is tight schedules. So for instance, the system that's being built and implemented now, basically, it's being built in a way that there are rounds of testing and there will be changes made. And so really the system won't be completely stable and final until, maybe a month before go live time.
And I
And
think
so
that's common.
yeah, it is. And so basically, yeah, we're not able to use the actual final product for developing training. And so we do. In fact, this is something I should see what article, if there are articles in your blog about this. Because one of the things we do is just identify the core understandings and skills that are the least likely to change through the process and focus on those first.
Right.
Another is to work right alongside the development and testing team. So we are up to date all the time on whatever defects are being fixed, which areas of functionality have been tested such that they're unlikely to change at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But then also, given change, it's possible that when we're doing, say, train the trainer, it's possible that a trainer may notice something, a way that something's configured, and might have a really good bit of input that was overlooked, or that people just didn't think of.
Yeah.
In order, so to change, make the configuration a little bit easier for operators to use. So even at that point, things can change.
Yeah.
And also, for training needs, change management is a need, but it's also a challenge too. So sometimes the way I think of it, and I haven't run this by many people, so I'm not sure who would agree with this or who wouldn't, but it sort of reminds me of, I play guitar, and there's a certain guitar that I've had for a long time, and I really, really like it. And I wonder if it might be sort of like somebody saying, "Hey, I'm gonna take your guitar away and give you a different guitar." And yeah, it's still a guitar, but it doesn't have the characteristics that I have. And these, the operators, they are working in a real-time situation where sometimes things happen so quickly that they're basically falling back on their training and their experience.
Yeah.
And they don't have a whole lot of time to think. And
right.
They need a system that really works well with the way they work.
That they're familiar with, and they have automaticity and experience, and yeah.
So we are being very careful to get input from operators, from the people who are going to use the system, to be very transparent about what's coming and what's changing.
Mm-hmm.
To do the best we can, if something is going to change, and some people might not like it, because pretty much, no matter what you do, of course, some people will like it and some people won't. So just being very clear about what the business reason is for change. There's another aspect that I'm learning about, which is the operators that we train belong to a union, and it's they have a job role that is codified. And so really with a new system, it's not changing their jobs. It's basically giving them different tools to be able to do the jobs that they were doing before.
Right.
But for the change management piece, we need to be really careful to not cross that line where, this is putting something on their plate that really wasn't supposed to be part of their jobs.
Gotcha.
Instead, really what we want to make this about is helping them do their jobs better. And excuse me. I want to say too, I know I'm kind of jumping around a lot.
You're fine.
But I guess this fits under the meeting the challenge category. Really, I see my job as really improving the quality of life of the people that we're training, or that we're helping to train. Basically, we want them to have more job satisfaction, to feel better at their jobs, to feel very prepared. And that really, to me, fits under change management and the change management challenge. One thing that I love about this job is that we have a permanent change management group. That's all they do, is work with various programs who are going through changes and consult with them. And so for the first time in my career, I am on a major project where change management is explicitly a part of the project. And there are people who specialize in change management who are working with us. And I'll get to work with them when we're designing to train a trainer. I'll get to work with them. I'll be able to consult with them at least for the content of the training. Because change management, is a big part of what we're doing.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you for that.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, that was interesting. So what are some of the biggest opportunities that your organization is trying to capture or grasp that you feel the training or learning development or instructional design efforts that you're taking place in can contribute to and help your company reach those?
So I would say for opportunities, we are in a position, actually, I think we're in a very vital role to enable the company to adapt to profound changes in the utility industry. And these changes, they include, one, going carbon neutral.
Yep.
In fact, our state legislature just passed a law that I think was it by 2025, 2024, our electricity needs to be carbon neutral throughout the state. Another is there is a big shift toward small customer-owned generation. So basically solar panels on people's roofs.
Yeah.
Actually, that's usually what it is. It's solar panels. And so there are a lot of, it's becoming more and more common for people to generate some of their own electricity and sell, if there's excess, they sell it back to the utility. So that basically, requires that the distribution grid be modernized. Let's see, what's another big change? Another change too, it's sort of part of the carbon neutral is finding efficiencies and putting them into place. Like for instance, there are ways that there's some certain sort of topologies of the distribution grid that leads to more loss of electricity. Basically, just energy just gets lost as it's going down those wires and between the transformers and the customer. And there are things that can be done to improve the efficiency considerably. So that's another one. So let's see. So for instance, for the customer generation, basically that will require more devices on the system that allows operators to see what's going on. So operators can see what's going on with each customer. Additional needs for safety and switching. If there's no customer generation, basically you can open a switch that goes to a bunch of customers. You don't need to worry about energy coming from the customer back. And now, of course, more switches are needed. Speaking of customer generation, sort of a type of that is batteries, such that the Tesla company builds. Those are becoming more common. So basically, this makes the distribution grid a lot more complicated.
Yeah.
And the systems that we're putting in place will give operators tools to be able to accommodate that. What I hear is that some utilities who aren't able to adapt to these changes, some utilities are likely going to go out of business. Because basically, especially in sunnier climates, I work with a guy who is based in Arizona. And he's saying, in a place like that where there's so much sun, basically when a lot of people have their own generation, of course, the utility will lose revenue. And that'll make it more difficult even for the utility to adapt.
Sure.
And so basically, utilities need to think of what they provide in a different way.
Right.
And in Washington State, with the sunshine being the lack of it, it's different from Arizona. But still, there needs to be a shift where the utility does not think of itself as a monopoly. The utility instead thinks of itself as we provide a very important service in terms of reliability, perhaps setting up equipment, perhaps helping to monitor equipment, things like that. As opposed to, we're the only choice they have for electricity, so we're just going to sit here and not worry about what may happen.
Right. So It sounds like your industry is, to use some jargon, is being
Mhm.
disrupted. You're having
Yeah.
to adapt to that. It would be
Mhm.
beneficial for you to have like to be a learning organization so you can
Yes.
innovate. Um,
Mhm.
have you guys
Yes.
ever tried? I won't drag you off on this. You can give a yes or no answer. Have you done anything like a hackathon to try to figure out how to be more adaptable in what you're doing?
No, not that I know of. We might have, but being new, I might
Yeah.
not be aware of it. Oh, interesting.
Well, I'll talk to you about that later.
Oh
Okay.
yeah,
Well,
hackathon, like basically people sort of hack together solutions to things. They make
yeah,
prototypes or
yeah.
something.
It doesn't necessarily
Cool.
mean code hacking, but it means how can we hack our company or hack our industry in order to be ready for the next change and to not become blockbuster, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay. So those are some huge opportunities, and it totally makes sense when you think about what we read in the news every day that your industry is changing so much. Um, so within that context, how would you describe the employee population that you're providing training to?
Wow. So highly competent, highly trained. These people, basically, it takes many years of on-the-job training and classroom training to get to the point where they can run their own operator desk. Um, Very smart, I would say, good at learning because they've had to pick up so much up to this point uh,
Hmm.
that they're good at learning new things. They take safety very seriously, very safety conscious. Um, Gosh,
What
I would
about what
too.
about age range or gender or anything?
Let's see. Age range, I would say it varies all the way from, I would say, late 20s into late 50s. I could be wrong about that.
Are you running into a situation where you're losing some skilled employees due to retirement?
Mm, we could be. I know that a lot of utilities are.
Okay.
I think it may be. I think we actually recently, before I got here, lost a bunch of people.
So are you
And
actively trying to recruit and upskill new? Is it distribution operators primarily?
that I don't know.
Okay.
Don't know, but I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, one of the things, what I hear, at least anecdotally,
Hmm.
is that operators don't stay in one job as long as they used to.
I see.
And I know too, part of the reason why I was hired is they want to basically they want to. I'm searching for the right words, but basically they want to beef up training. They want to they want to have a much more substantial training organization that has professional instructional designers and that basically takes some of the training load off of the subject matter experts
Hmm.
and also just sort of helps codify the training more.
Well, that's an interesting point. And if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you a question about that. And I know you may not have been the person who made that decision. You're the person they hired as a result of that decision. But do you
Yeah.
know why your company came to the realization that they wanted to make a bigger investment in instructional design and training now? What caused them to do that?
That's a really good question. Which means I don't know the answer. I mean, I can tell you again. It's mostly it's anecdotal things that I hear.
Hmm.
Um,
Well, we'll come back to that in maybe a future
yeah,
webinar. But yeah,
yeah.
obviously your company saw the value in putting money and resources into instructional
Yes,
design and training in a way that it
yes,
had not. And it seems
yes,
logical. Like an obvious answer is because there's a lot of change going on, um,
yeah.
and there's a lot of opportunity, and they have to rethink. They're not a monopoly anymore, and they can't just let people have have the same thing they've been having all the time.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
need to respond to different market forces
yeah, yeah.
and innovate. Okay. So you've got these highly skilled employees, highly intelligent, great learners. What types of or forms or modes or delivery methods of training are you currently using?
So it's across the board,
Hmm.
uh, but in the program that I work on, it's largely instructor led, in person, hands on, using a simulation environment. And the new product that we're implementing, one of the things most exciting to me is that it is a very robust simulation environment, such that the majority of the training will be scenarios that are loaded into this environment, and people will do the switching and issue the clearances and do all these things as if it's a real scenario. What we want to add actually is scenarios that they can do on their own. So if it's during a shift and if it's a time when they're sort of able to do other things, when they're at work, they can go and do these scenarios, do some practice. I also think that down the road, we may want to add some e-learnings, especially for new employees who come on new. They can sort of do it on their own time. We're actually planning on doing some e-learnings for this project, and we're going to make them really short, like maybe 5 minutes or less. Because basically the way that an operator shift goes, it's really hard to say when they're going to have time to do an e-learning.
Right.
Sometimes they have, stretches of time when they can do some other things, and sometimes the whole shift, it's just constant communication the whole shift. So it's hard to say. So I'm excited to start building some short e-learnings, because I haven't been able to do that as much as I would have liked to. I've found that in other jobs, from the subject matter expert, there's often pressure to make e-learnings longer because they want to put everything in. And often in my job, my focus is on, well, let's look at the real training outcomes, and is that really necessary? And I think that, for them to sit for 50 minutes in e-learning is an awfully long time and things like that. So I'm looking forward to making some short ones and seeing how that goes.
Cool. If I can ask a couple follow-ups, can you tell us this scenario simulation environment that people are working in? Is this just like a simulated control panel? Like, is it a real physical thing, or do I have VR glasses on?
No VR. It's just basically it's basically the views and the functionality that they will have on their computer screens. Yeah.
Gotcha. And then you talked about scenarios, and it sounds like currently that you're training these people by running them through scenarios, but it sounds like the scenario involves like an instructor present, because you want to get to the point where it's totally self-guided and independent. Right. Can you explain that the way you're doing scenarios now?
So I can say what I've seen. This is also getting to being new. I haven't seen enough of it. The way it's done now is there's sort of like a scenario leader who is sitting at his computer and who is inputting changes in the system.
I see.
They're actually putting in like a break in a circuit where a pole may have come down.
Right.
And then the person will call the trainee and will say, hey, we got this report of a pole down. And then the trainee will call a crew to go out and look at it. And there will be somebody who is at a desk, with a phone, who can sort of like play the role of the crew. Right. It kind of goes like that. So it's basically a manual sort of
manual simulation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So So when that, as the trainee is performing his or her responses and decisions and all this, is somebody there giving that person kind of feedback and help real time, or do they evaluate? Or do you evaluate it afterwards and kind of sit down and talk them through? How do you do the feedback aspect of it?
It's evaluating afterwards.
Afterwards, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
And I've seen, it's interesting because this reminds me of when I was working at the University of Washington doing healthcare education. Often there too, they wouldn't get feedback until the scenario is over. And I know from sort of from assessment theory in the education world, basically the more complicated a task is, the more value there is in having them complete the whole task and then give feedback. Because that way you can sort of talk through, okay, what were you thinking here? And you can talk through sort of their response. You can talk through, like, if there was a period where they got really flustered and confused, you can sort of talk through what that was like. And you can also give the person a chance to do some self-correction. Because of course, if you give immediate feedback, sometimes that sort of robs them of the ability to make self-correction.
Right, right.
Yeah,
So,
not that immediate feedback isn't good, doesn't have its place too, but I think, yeah, in this case, I think it works really well to have the feedback afterward.
no, I think you're right. That sounds good.
Yeah.
So, you've described a bit of you have a heavy emphasis on basically like hands-on training, which is
Mhm.
through an interesting method of simulator. And but you're going to include some e-learnings in the future. You probably have some written materials. Do you have kind of, I think, a holy grail in the learning and development world is trying to figure out like how to put together a most effective blended learning solution. Do you have any
Yeah.
off-the-cuff tips? And it's okay if you don't, for how you would design a blend.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say, as much as possible, um, put the foundational material, the foundational understandings in e-learnings,
Mm-hmm.
and then use the face-to-face, real-time classroom time more for practicing complicated skills, complex skills. So an example of that is where I was before. We did child welfare training. We trained new social workers in the child welfare system. So basically child protective services. A lot of these people worked in that program. And so there we would use e-learnings for some of the background in, here are the basics of the purpose of your job. Here's sort of like the frameworks for sort of, thinking about how to think of your role, say, as you're approaching a situation. We also used it for basically teaching some things about child development, some basic stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then the face-to-face part was used for in-person simulation. So basically the trainer would play the role, say, of a parent, and the person being trained would be themselves, social worker, and they'd practice, say, an interview with the parent. Or they would also use class time for discussion about really difficult issues, like what do you do if you enter a home and you feel afraid, like you feel like maybe this person might assault you, and that's the kind of thing where it's there's a lot of emotion in that question, and it really helps to be in a room with other people and people to share their feelings with each other, and for the instructor to sort of monitor that and give their expert opinion, that sort of thing.
So
um,
that's a good example. And then I guess putting that in the context of what you're doing now, it sounds like you would maybe be making these e-learning courses, these short e-learning courses you're talking about for foundational knowledge. What is it? Am I
right.
correct? What are maybe a couple foundational knowledge pieces that you would want to build these e-learning courses on?
I would say, like, one is the business case. Here's why we're switching systems.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Here is why, if we stay with the current system, we could start to sort of lose relevance as an electric utility.
Mm-hmm.
Why we're not keeping up. We wouldn't be keeping up with the times and with the changes that are ahead.
Yeah.
That's one. That's
a
one.
great point, by the way.
Yeah, yeah. In fact, I don't know, that gets at the e-learnings that I'm starting to work on now. In many ways, they are change management pieces, and sort of to help people understand. Here's why these changes are being made. Here's what you can expect. Here's how we'll support you with training. And in addition to being change management, kind of at the same time, these are also they're also what you could call pre-learning or preparation for future learning. They're basically sort of helping people get more out of the training that is to come.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I guess if that's your foundation, which all makes sense, obviously you're more advanced when people are actually practicing these skills would be something like the simulator you just talked about, the kind of manual simulation. I imagine at some point that might become kind of an online or somehow technology assisted simulation that might possibly include some kind of VR. Have you guys had any conversations along those lines?
I've started to ask about it. Yeah, I'm still kind of getting a sense of where VR might fit in.
Do you guys
in fact, sorry, go
talk
ahead.
about it at work?
No, we don't. I actually brought it up once with my boss, because one of the things that I wonder is, I wonder if it would help operators a lot to be able to physically see the spatial relationship of, say, a substation.
Yep.
And right now for me, that's an open question, because right now, sort of the way things are is I think a lot of the substations that they operate, they have never actually visited it before. So in their view, they can see the topology, they can see where the switches are, they can see how all the components are related. But they haven't actually gone there and looked around and kind of gotten that image. And so to me, it's an open question. Would that help them? It might. I'm not really sure, though.
What about people who aren't distribution operators and who aren't at a control panel, but people who are actually out in the field? Do you know if you're doing any kind of simulator or VR training with that employee population?
No.
All right. Well, obviously VR is changing, so it'll be interesting to see what the answer is in 5 years, right?
In fact, I would love to. This is something too I should search your blog about VR, because I hear about it, and in fact, in my previous job, there was a lot of talk about it. In that situation, funding was a big limitation. But I must say I want to learn more about VR.
I think that puts you in good company. I think many people are trying to figure out how to use it. They're excited about the potential, but maybe they don't know how to use it quite yet, or for their needs. But you're smart to be asking the right question. Like, does it solve my need?
By the way, do you remember Lisa Frumkes from Apex?
Yep.
So she's somebody you might want to reach out to because she knows a lot about VR. In her case, anyway, I had lunch with her a while ago, and it was really interesting because she was bringing up things that I never really thought about with VR. Like one of the things she said was there's this practical capability that it has, which is there are times where somebody wants to take training on a phone, but if you have VR, you basically can have a much bigger user interface.
Right.
So say if you have a game and a phone doesn't have enough screen real estate, the VR will give you that real estate.
Right. I think that's a big issue with mobile learning for your phone, which is cool and everything, but you have to design for the phone. And that's a good point. VR there's a different set of design parameters. Well, so what do you like about your job, and what most excites you about it?
I guess I like that the work is very important. Modern civilization depends on the grid. It's not just a convenience thing. Lives depend on it. The economy depends on it. I love the science and the physics of it. Ever since I was a young kid, I remember my dad took me to Grand Coulee Dam, and I thought it was fascinating. And when I was little, I would always just riding in the car, I would just look up at the power lines and wonder about them and read about them and learn about them and stuff. And so the subject matter to me is fascinating. It's wonderful that I work with people who are willing to share their knowledge. I've been asking a lot of questions, and they seem to appreciate that, and they don't mind answering these questions. They seem to even enjoy answering questions and educating me about it. So I love that. I guess too, what excites me is that things seem really wide open. I think I'm part of a new era in training in this company, and my job really part of my job is to think about what else can we do, what are other technologies we can use, what are methods we can use, things like that.
That makes sense, especially given the fact, I guess, the fact you'd already explained that industry is changing rapidly, and your organization has to change or is changing as a result of that. Two, all the change management you have about all the different software platforms you're using and all that. It totally makes sense that you yourself would be in a position. And I guess three, that your organization's increased interest in instructional design and learning and development and training. That you would constantly be right now evaluating all these new technologies and trying to figure out what's best for you, including how to blend them with, face-to-face, hands-on training as well. All right.
Reminds me too, when you were asking about simulation training, part of why I'm pausing, I'm realizing, and I'm thinking too, this is probably a very common instructional design sort of dilemma or thing to manage is right now the simulation training is really run and managed by the subject matter experts, by the actual operators.
Mm-hmm.
And it's gonna stay that way. Really, the operators are always gonna have a lot of control over the training, and they're going to be delivering a lot of the training. And my role is much more to support them.
Right.
And I think that as we use more technologies, my role will grow.
Yeah, makes sense.
My role will grow in sort of codifying and in turn, skills and things like that, and codifying curriculum and that sort of thing. But yeah, I feel, how can I say this? I guess I'll say I don't want to step on their toes. I don't want to just sort of insert myself before I have really sort of in some areas I'm still sort of finding ways to insert myself. And right now, it's pretty easy because it's a new software system. And basically what I'm doing is I am managing the development of training for this new system. And this is not training on how to do their job. This is training on how to use these new tools.
Right. Right.
Yeah, that's a really rambling answer.
Well, no, it sounds like you're saying.
But part of why I was pausing is I was thinking, wow, if one of them were to see me describe the simulation, which is something that they do, I think it's possible that they would think he doesn't really know what he's talking about because he's not the one who does it. It's us who does it. Yeah.
Well, but I think what you're pointing out is there's a partnership between the subject matter expert and the instructional designer. You're saying that they have a lot of control and you want it to continue that way. You're recognizing that your role is support, that you're not the boss here, you're not ordering from above, and the importance of developing a relationship that has trust.
Yeah,
as a component, both ways, and that all makes sense. And I think what you're saying as well, in a situation where you're essentially doing kind of like face-to-face training, instructor-led training, even if it's a scenario, that the emphasis is going to be more on the content, and you can still help them with some training basics and some instructional design basics. But as we become a more as we move more to technology-assisted trainings, you're probably going to end up having more expertise on things that are more obscure or arcane or unfamiliar to them, and you're going to develop. And so, there's two aspects to that. One is that you're going to have to learn all this stuff yourself, including me too, right? Like we're all going to become more familiar with things like artificial intelligence, not just virtual reality and augmented reality, but artificial intelligence and analytics. We all need to up our game on those kind of things. That as you start to get more expertise in some of these new fields, you'll have to continue to build that relationship with your subject matter experts.
Yeah.
So that it continues to be one that's based on trust.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. And I'm realizing too, as you say, analytics, I think this is an area where I think the subject matter experts will really appreciate what I can do. I think that's, I'm very excited to start to do some more evaluation. I don't know how much evaluation has been done so far, but really I'm looking forward to being able to gather data on what the learners are doing and what they're learning, and to show what's effective and what's not effective, and to show where we can improve. And the SMEs that I work with, they really appreciate data. They really appreciate evidence-based decision making, and I think they'll be excited to see that.
I'm sure you're right. Well, I look forward to, let's keep in touch on that offline, and then maybe we can talk to you about that in the future when you got that rolling. Well, Tom, this is great. Any other questions that I should have asked you about training in the energy generation and distribution industry, or any final parting words of wisdom for us?
No, nothing that I can think of. Well, no, I'll say one thing. I'll just say, about safety, about the importance of safety. I would say, so basically safety in this company, and I think in the industry in general, It's not just safety for the people who are climbing the poles and working with the conductors. It's also safety for the community because the transmission lines and the cables and the wires are going. Anyway, I'll leave it at that. I probably shouldn't have started.
No, you're right. All organizations have, we tend to think of just employee safety, but many organizations have to worry about community safety as well. And that totally makes sense in your industry.
Yeah.
Like you said, you're all around my house right now.
Yeah. So basically, for instance, those wildfires in California.
Good point. Yeah, that's in the news all the time.
The most likely cause is a problem with the electrical transmission system.
Yep.
And actually, probably there will be new regulations coming our way, and those regulations are probably going to involve training.
Yeah.
So that's an example of community safety.
Yeah. All right. Great example. Okay,
Yeah.
Tom, thank you so much. For everybody out there, again, a little reminder, make sure I've got Tom's title right. This was Tom Baer. He's a senior instructional designer with Puget Sound Energy, and he works in their electric operations training. I'd like to thank Tom a lot. Keep your eye out. We might be doing another interview with Tom on some related topics, possibly that data-driven evaluation piece he was talking about in the future. And Tom, thank you very much, and have a great day.
Thank you. Yeah, you too, Jeff.
I'm going to hit pause here, and I'll meet you on the other side of the pause button.
Okay.